Well, hello, everyone. I am Tisha Johnson, Senior Director of Admissions for the Illinois College of Optometry, and this is another one of our webinar Wednesday series. We're going to talk to a couple of our alum here. And so if you're watching this recording and you have any questions, always feel free to email admissions@ico.edu. We'll be happy to put you in contact with some of our alum that may be in your area. So we'll start off with some brief introductions, and then I'll have our speakers answer some questions. But like I said, if you have questions, definitely feel free to pop them in the chats. So we have with us Dr. Chris Wong, class of 2022, and Dr. Nicole Stinnett, class of 2017. And I know actually both of these folks pretty well. They have been in my time. Tomorrow makes my 17th year at ICO. So I've worked with both of them during their time at school, and happy that they're going to join us this evening for a little Q&A. So I will get into some questions here in a second. Like I said, I'll have you guys introduce yourselves. So if you just want to tell us a little bit about where you're from and so the practice setting that you're currently in. So Dr. Stinnett, I'll start with you.
Okay. So I'm in Maryland. I'm from Maryland. And after school, I moved back to Maryland. And I currently practice in a corporate setting.
Okay. And Dr. Wong?
So I'm actually from California. And then I'm currently doing a residency in ocular disease all the way in New Hampshire at the VA. And then on the weekends, I also work at a corporate position as well.
Okay, awesome. We'll definitely have to talk about how the whole residency process went, and you can explain that for our students. So we're going to start way back. I know this is something that I feel like as an alum, you're like, you know what, I don't even remember. But we're gonna sort of see if we can jog your memory here. So when you both were considering optometry schools, what made you apply to ICO and then ultimately decide to attend? So Dr. Wong, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so from being from California, I knew a lot of the California schools pretty well. But I feel like for most people, it's hard to kind of venture out into other states. So I was kind of going to the cycle with an open mind. And a lot of things with the ICO program that stood out was everyone kept talking about the clinical experience and the disease aspect. And so when I got an invite for an interview, I definitely went, and it was, I think, my second interview, and I was kind of blown away from really just the way everyone treated me. From the person who greeted me, there was a student who greeted me and kind of showed me around the night before and gave me this tour that she really didn't have to do. And I remember very well that we were walking around, she knew everyone. Everyone knew her. She was saying hi to everyone. So it almost seemed like, is this like, do they know I'm here? Like, do they know that? So that's why they're all saying hi and like trying to put on this quote unquote like a show or something like that. But reality was they had no idea who I was and that I was like a prospective student. And, everyone from like the security was really nice from the day I got there for the interview. And it just had this very like kind of home family feel. And, that's kind of what you want in a program. You want to feel comfortable in a program, that you're not just a number. And I know there's a lot of people who talk about the fact that we have a large class size, but it really has no effect on it at all. You definitely get to know all your classmates and all the professors and everyone in between. Like I was saying earlier, the security officers and even the janitors and things like that. So I thought that was a good touch, and it pretty much stayed true to how it was in my interview process when I actually attended school. So I just had that feeling after I left ICO, and I knew that that was the place I wanted to go. And after I left there, that was my second interview, and that was kind of the bar that every other school after, which I went to 5 interviews, they had to try to meet that bar. And no one else could beat it. So it was kind of a no-brainer at that point.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Dr. Stinnett?
So when I was applying to schools, I applied very late in the cycle or the process, right? So I looked at all the schools that had late deadlines. I'm not gonna lie. And so ICO was one of them, right? But then when I narrowed the schools even further, I had to look at board passing rates. And I feel like ICO had one of the highest passing rates for boards. And that was very important to me because I can graduate from any optometry school, but it makes no sense if you can't practice, right? So the fact that ICO was really good with boards, that was a deciding factor, a really big one when I chose to go to ICO and apply. And then when I did go for the interview, everybody was really super nice. I felt very comfortable. At first, I was nervous, but that went away very easily talking to everybody. And I agree, everybody was smiling, like weirdly nice, but I guess in a good way. You're like, do you have some ulterior motive to get me to come here? But I did like the security was there as well, so they were able to like talk to you about like the system. They showed you everything about all the cameras they had and everything, so it made you feel comfortable even attending the school, like in Chicago. And I also stayed across the street. What is that place called again?
The residential
Yes,
complex.
yes, yes. I stayed across the street. They give you that option. I'm not sure if they still do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, for your interview, so you don't even have to worry about staying like getting a hotel or anything. Like you're literally just across the street for your interview. So that took off a lot of stress as well the day of the interview. Um, and then when they gave us a tour of everything, the facilities are very nice. Everything's up to date, like the equipment's everything. So that was also important to me because I did have an interview at a school before that that was not as quite up to date. So that was definitely a deciding factor as well.
Okay, great, great. And so I'll touch on what they actually both talked a little bit about, which is our opportunity to stay in our residential complex the night before your interview at no charge. So if any candidate gets invited to interview, as part of their email, they will see a link out to our applicant host program. So you can get signed a student ambassador. They'll greet you the night before your interview. So they'll come to your room, make sure everything is you settled in okay. And then if you want, they'll do a tour with you the night before your interview so it can show you around a little bit. So you're probably not, hopefully, as nervous the day of the interview. But if you don't do the tour, you're going to get a tour as part of your interview process as well. And now I'll agree with this. Even though I wasn't interviewing for school, when I came to interview for the job at ICO, everybody was very friendly. And everybody said hello to the HR rep who was walking me around. So it's really on our campus is a small campus, so it's really true that it's sort of like a family feel, if you will, and everybody's very, very friendly. From the staff perspective, it's about supporting students. So I am glad you guys sort of shared on a little bit of that ICO feel that you received when you came for your interview day. So, all right, Dr. Stinnett, I have a question for you. So what student organizations were you involved in?
The two main ones were FCO, which is the Fellowship Christian of Fellowship Christian Optometrists, yeah, and then NOSA as well. But the FCO one, that was really cool because you were able to go on a mission trip earlier than I forgot what the other organization was, but you can go in your second year, and so to have that opportunity was really cool because we did end up going to Guatemala. I did end up going to Guatemala and doing a lot of eye exams for the community there, so that was really cool. And then the other one I was part of was NOSA, which is also important because it aims to bring access eye care to underserved communities and minorities. So that was cool to be part of as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And Dr. Wong?
I was part of the private practice club. And I can honestly say I didn't miss one meeting that we had, at least up until COVID. I think COVID kind of shortened things for us, for my class, kind of shut things down. But I've always been very interested in private practice. Coming in, I had worked at a couple of different ones, and that was kind of my mindset to go into after graduating. And they bring in a bunch of speakers and kind of talk to you, and that was kind of interesting. And you can kind of pick their brains and see different mindsets and how they go about their different practices. And then the other one I was in was Cornea and Contact Lenses, or Contact Lens Society, I think it was called. Previously, they didn't let like first and second years in it, but they started to kind of let the second years join the third years and fourth years into it. So that was nice because they always had different speakers, and I was very interested in context as well. So I think the biggest thing with the clubs is that you can join as many as you want, and you kind of choose what you're interested in, and you don't have obligations to go to all the meetings. You can go to the ones that might interest you more, and skip on the ones that you don't feel like you're that interested in. And um, there's always usually free food, so that's always a good thing. And it's a nice break from studying as well, to kind of switch it up and learn about something else.
Good. I feel like free food is always a draw, whether it's undergrad, professional school, it doesn't matter. College students love a good meal. Has to be a good meal, of course. So I would say, as we sort of continue this conversation about student life, what were some of your fondest memories of being a student at ICO? Dr. Wong, if you want to start off with that one.
My fondest memories. I think just kind of hanging out with friends at their house. I actually lived in the residential complex. Getting to know the professors. Because at the end of the day, your time goes by really fast. And before you know it, you're in your fourth year rotations, and you're gonna miss everyone at the school, which is a good thing. That means you had a good time. There's a lot to do in Chicago. Downtown is only about 3.5 miles away, and there's tons of good food. That was kind of my biggest thing, was to try all the different restaurants. I have a list of almost 100 different restaurants I tried throughout my time there, and so that was kind of the thing I love to do on the weekends, and coffee shops as well. There's a bunch of unique coffee shops to go study at. So I think those are kind of some of my fondest memories.
Thank you. Dr. Stennett?
Eyeball was really good memory, or were really good memories for me. I think I went every single year. It's basically like prom for optometry students. Like, you get to dress up and go attend. I want to say it's a party, but like this event, right, where there's music and food and drinks and everything, and you get to spend a lot of time with everybody at the school, not just only your year. So that was also really fun. I'm really fond of going to coffee shops. I went to coffee shops a lot to study, just to get a change of scenery. Instead of like at the library in your room, it's nice to have downtown Chicago so close, and get to try all these different coffee shops. So those definitely my fondest memories of the school.
All right, good. I would ask you some of your favorites, but I won't put you all on the spot. Um, so looking back, would you do anything differently? Dr. Stennett, I'll have you answer that.
I think um, I think I would join more organizations. I feel like I was always studying. I spent a lot of time studying. And then I feel like I would have enjoyed Chicago more. Chicago does have a lot to offer. It's a really, really great city, great food, great nightlife, everything. And I feel like I wish, especially during my first year, I would have taken more time to, or find time to explore Chicago a little bit more.
All right, Dr. Wong.
Honestly, probably wouldn't change much at all.
Okay.
I think I definitely had a little bit of a rough start to optometry school, which I wouldn't really change, just because it taught me a lot. It taught me how to study. It kind of made who I am today. And, I felt like I was able to connect with a lot of, my classmates, both upper and some of the lower class, and also get to know a lot of the professors and attendings very well, some of which that I still keep in touch with today. And so I value my relationships with them, and hope I continue to keep in touch with them, and they're kind of serve as like a mentor role for me in different things. It's always kind of fun to share cases with them, even though we're not in the same clinic or anything like that, just to kind of pick their brains and things like that, or whether it's about a job opportunity. And so I don't think I would change anything.
All right, good. So let's talk, Dr. Wong, a little bit about residency. You opted to do a residency program, and residencies are not required for the profession of optometry, though you'll find a lot of folks who recommend them, especially if you're planning to teach or work in a hospital setting. So, Dr. Wong, what made you decide to do a residency?
So coming into school, I already kind of had an idea that I was going to do a residency, but then I know maybe halfway through, maybe my second year, I started to like kind of second guess it. Mainly because like every time you ask someone, I still to this day tell people take it with a grain of salt who you ask. If you ask someone who didn't do a residency, they're going to tell you you're going to be totally fine and you don't need to do one. If you ask someone who did do a residency, they're going to tell you it's the best thing for you. You should definitely do it. You'll never regret it. So, just take it with a grain of salt. And I did a lot of research on it, and I asked a bunch of people, both, who did one and didn't do one. And at the end of the day, you have to do it for yourself. I feel like if you have to persuade yourself to do it, that's going to be a tough sell for you. I've always been really interested in the ocular disease courses. So I thought that would be a good fit for me. And then it was kind of just about kind of finding the right program. There's a lot of good programs out there. At one point, I had like 20 different programs on my list, and I was like, "There's no way I can entertain 20 different offers or interviews and go to them. That's very expensive and very time consuming during fourth year." So, I was able to cut down to 7, and I definitely don't regret my decision at all. I think it's great. You're going to get a lot of experience working with whatever kind of specialty you want. And especially with optometry becoming more medical, I feel like it's even more valuable to have it. And then the career path that I chose, or I want to have, which is more medical, I thought it would be a wise thing to do. And it's going to be a lot of work, but you know, anything that's worth doing, is going to have a lot of work, just like optometry school. And so I'm about 3/4 almost of the way in. So, now I'm actually starting to look for jobs after residency. So the process is long sometimes, with match day being in March, and you kind of have to get a lot of your ducks in a row, making sure that you have your letters of recommendation, and you should be building those relationship early on, because the better you can get to know one of the professors or multiple professors, the better your letter of rec is going to be. You don't want to be asking these professors who barely know you for a letter, because they're not going to be able to really write that much stuff about you, because they barely know you. So I think you have to start early in first and second year, getting to build those relationships. So yeah.
Awesome. And so what are your plans after residency? Are you looking to then work in a sort of medical-based practice? Or are you looking to work in a hospital setting? What are you currently thinking?
Right now I'm kind of looking for like an OD/MD practice. I wouldn't mind staying in the VA system. However, it's very hard to find a position in a VA position. I always tell people, people who go into the VA are kind of lifers. Once they just stay there forever. So you're almost kind of wishing someone retires or leaves for some reason to kind of get a spot. But definitely something more medical. I see a lot of ocular disease, so I want to be able to put kind of this year to use, and kind of manage a lot of the cases that I see on a daily basis.
Awesome. And for those who don't know, a VA is like a veterans hospital. And so part of our program years ago, students are, that's okay, we're required to do a veterans rotation, but now it's sort of optional for students in the program. All right, so Dr. Stennett, I know you didn't do a residency, but you went and chose to go sort of straight to practice, if you will.
Yeah.
And you're in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
So what made you choose that practice type, and sort of like, what's your typical day?
Yeah. So I chose corporate because that's like what I worked in before I started optometry school. So it's really what I was used to. I was used to that type of practice modality. Um, so typical day for me, start like at 9 or 10, end at like 5:30, 6:30. But I really only handle the doctor side. I don't do anything as far as the optical side, like the glasses. I don't deal with insurances. I don't order contacts. I don't do any of the pre-testing. My only job is just to focus on the exams and the patient, which is what I really like. All the other stuff kind of stresses me out. So just only being able to deal with the patient and establishing those relationships is really good for me. And then at the end of the day, since I don't have to deal with any like office work, I leave work at work. So I can come home and spend all my time with my kids and my husband and all that stuff. So um, corporate was the best fit for my lifestyle.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good, good. And for those who don't know, there are a variety of modalities and specialties in the profession of optometry. So I always encourage students to, explore. And when you start the application process, of course, you don't have to have a plan for what you're going to do after graduation. Sometimes we may ask about it just because we want to see sort of what you're thinking about. But I always encourage students to shadow in different modalities, different specialties, just to get a feel for what's out there in the profession. And there are plenty of times where I interview someone and they say, all right, I want to do this type of residency or this type of practice. But then, when graduation comes around 3 years, 9 months later, all right, I'm going to sort of like a totally different direction. But optometry school will expose you to a lot of things. And so that's where I always encourage students just to be open, because you never know what you're going to end up liking compared to what your initial plan is when you start optometry school. So we talked a little bit about your typical day, and I know you mentioned a little bit about this, Dr. Wong, but sort of what is your typical day in your residency?
So residency for me, hours are I typically walk in around 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. I'll review the charts for the morning. The reason why I do that is these patients come with a lot of baggage, so I always like to come prepared and know what's going on with them before I see them. I will see anywhere from 8 to 12 patients a day, with some add-ons if needed for like emergencies or um, things from urgent care that need to be seen. And then I usually leave at 5:30. And yeah, I have presentations, both short and long, and some journal clubs I do with the students that rotate. These presentations are things that either cases I've seen or topics that I'm interested in that I want to personally learn more about, and want to share with the group. The group meaning some of my attending doctors that I work with, which is 6 of them, or also the students, which we usually have anywhere from 4 to 7 students rotating with us at a given time. And coming into residency, I wasn't really keen on the presentation part. That was honestly probably one of the things I dreaded the most, but I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it, and I can honestly say I don't dread it as much as I used to. And you learn a lot, so you feel more comfortable putting together a presentation and just doing the whole thing. I think we've done like 6 or 7 throughout the year already of some form of presentations, which is a heavy amount. But I think it's kind of nice to just kind of dive in there. And the one thing I personally like about my residency is very kind of tailored towards what me and my co-resident want to do. If there's something that we're not really liking or we want to change, they're very receptive and willing to change things. It's not like an uphill battle to change things. So they value us a lot, and they kind of hold us to a good standard, which is good as well, but they also respect us as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So, next question for you would be, so how do you feel ICO prepares you for your career? So, Dr. Wong, will let you continue.
Oh, I mean, I think ICO prepared me actually very well, especially when you get to kind of see how, other schools and other students are prepared. You're not necessarily comparing yourself to them, but you're definitely kind of seeing like, oh, they don't know how to do this, or they've never seen this before. And you kind of look at your background like, oh, we see this all the time, at the ICO clinic. And so I think that alone just kind of sets ICO apart. And you truly don't know that until, because all you know is ICO when you're at ICO. You don't really know anything else until you go on your rotations or do a residency with other students from other schools, and then you really kind of see the difference that ICO made, whether it's clinically or didactically in the classroom. So I always tell people I'm super happy with the education I got, and I definitely don't regret it.
All right, Dr. Stinnett, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, 100%. I feel like clinic wise, ICO really prepares you very well for practicing outside of school because I think we start like our first year in clinic, which is a lot earlier than a lot of the other schools. As for I think we just shadow, but I still you get comfortable being in clinic and being and seeing patients and things like that. So that's also that also helped a lot. Um, I feel like I had a lot of confidence when I started practicing um, because of the externship rotations and all that stuff that we were able to do our fourth year, if I remember correctly. Yes. And then we also get 2 weeks off to study for boards. So I feel like ICO does every these little things that build on itself to prepare you for your future. And it may not seem so significant at that time, but looking back on it, it really helped a lot. And it's like too numerous to recall here, but I feel like ISO prepares you very well to practice. Yeah.
Great, great. And so Al, surprised we have a couple of changes, and not that you graduated that long ago, but I think it speaks to I think it speaks to though, because I always tell students that when I'm interviewing, I've been at ICO for 17 years, and so of course changes have happened.
Yeah.
Like when I started, you were doing shadowing in clinic, but
Yeah.
now you actually are getting some hands-on experience. So you're really working, partnering with your a third year student, and they're letting you do as you get checked off on your clinical skills, you start doing some of the pre-interest testing. And so a lot of students actually like the program for that. They want that early exposure into the clinic and want to be able to, get hands-on experience. And so it's been going pretty well. And I don't know, Dr. Wong, if you had that when you started first year, or were you guys just doing observation?
No, we had that, I believe.
Okay.
The funny thing is, I was someone who was really keen on getting into clinic as fast as I could. But at the same time, as much as you want to be in clinic first year or even as early as you can, you know, at the end of the day, you don't know that much. I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah.
But I think ICO does a good job of kind of easing your way into clinic, not trying to overwhelm you with too much responsibility, whether it's observing first and then shadowing and then just getting skills checked off to being partnered up, then to being by yourself. So there's like these little baby steps that you might not realize is important. But at the end of the day, clinic can be a scary place when you don't have the knowledge yet that you have yet to gain.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. When I first started ICO, you hear students, they want to get into clinic early, and it's like, first you have to sort of learn, one, the ICO way of doing things. Because I know sometimes students will come in and have experience as an optician, and I would always say you have to sort of unlearn what you've learned and learn how ICO wants you to do things. And so it's always interesting when people are ready to get in there, but that early exposure has gone pretty well. We currently, Dr. Sinnott, you probably don't know this either. So second year, we have that partnership where, you're partnering with a fellow second year.
Yeah.
And this is the second year that now in the third quarter, so in the spring quarter of second year, our students are actually seeing patients by themselves. And so, yeah, I know. She's like, I'm floored. Yes. And so, like I said, it goes back to ICO really being sort of on the forefront of things and not trying to push our students into it, but seeing where that happy medium is of making sure students are, taught and trained and know the skills that they need to do and have the knowledge, and then getting them opportunities to be, more engaged within the clinical setting. And so even our third years are now doing rotations in a lot of the specialty suites. And so, and I mean, you just graduated in 17, so not that long ago, to be quite honest. And so things, do happen. And I think it just speaks to the college and the administrative team, the faculty who, these decisions are not made like, oh, yeah, we're just going to put students in clinic, but really making sure students have valuable experiences in the clinical setting and getting as much exposure as they can while they're in the clinic. So thank you all for sort of sharing a little bit about that. And so actually, I do have a question that has popped up. So I'll go to this question. So how prepared did you feel in preparing for boards with the curriculum at ICO? So I don't know who wants to answer first. Dr. Stennett, if you want to go first.
Very prepared. I feel like okay. Well, when we went on externships, you get to talk to other students because uh, Dr. Wong said about how you just really only know what ICO does when you're at ICO. But we do take a lot of tests pretty frequently the first year. I don't know if it's still like that, but I feel like every other day we had an exam. Um, so you get used to taking like the multiple choice questions and everything, and I feel like that really helped for part one of boards. And then also we got time off to study for part one. Um, we had what was that study thing that came to our school?
KMK.
KMK, yes. When KMK came to our school and you bought the books and everything, that helped a lot with boards. And then even with the other parts of boards, like being able to have the practice lanes at school to practice for your part three and everything, that also helped a lot. So ICO prepares you very, very well, very, very well for boards.
So just in case everyone knows, there's 3 parts of the boards. You take the first part in March of your 3rd year, and you take the last 2 throughout your 4th year. One in December, and the other one, the last one, part 3, pretty much anytime in 4th year. And part 3 is the one that is more kind of hands-on, I guess, clinical, practical kind of one. But for the short answer, ICO does a very good job of preparing us. The reason why is because the whole program is, one is very, intense and vigorous, and it's like that for a reason. It's good for you in the end. I think sometimes when you're going through it, obviously, when it's tough, you wonder why it's so tough. But at the end of the day, when you finally made it over the hill, you'll realize like it was good for you. But sometimes it's hard for you to realize when you're going through the program. And the program is solely based on boards. Basically, everything I remember, all the objectives, whether for tests or practicals, everything was based on what's going to be on boards. How is boards testing us? And that's how the whole program is set up. So, you just don't value certain things until you're actually done with the program. Like I remember there's things where I would complain about, and now looking back, I'm like, why was I ever complaining? Like, this is so much better than another school that I know of, and they don't have as many practice lanes as us for boards. We have these 3 lanes that are set up just like boards, and you can go in there whenever you want to and practice for however long you want to. And unfortunately, not every school has as many as us, and it's not as accessible to everyone as well. So those little things that you just take for granted when you're going through the program really is a big feature. But there are some testing, the tests or the boards are standardized. So there's some companies out there who help prepare you for these tests, one of which is KMK, and there's another one that's called Optoprep. And so a lot of us purchase these to help us kind of study, but you can also go back to your notes for classes as well to kind of dig a little deeper. These companies are more of a surface level and kind of a quick and dirty thing, but doesn't give you the same amount of details as your class notes would be. So overall, very, very prepared.
All right, good. So we got a question that's actually asking about sort of rotations and a little bit about are you able to pick the ones that you wanted? And I sort of responded a little bit, but if you want to talk a little bit about like Dr. Wong, because I feel like Dr. Stinnett, the process may have changed, but Dr. Wong, if you want to sort of share like, what the externship process was like for your class group. And they also wanted to know sort of like which ones would you recommend that you found like most beneficial for you after graduation? I feel like that's a loaded question, but if you can take that first part about the selection process and then talk about the second one.
So the selection process overall can be slightly confusing to explain. But for the most part, you're basically put in these 4 buckets, and within those 4 buckets, you get 3 picks. Now you have to do at least one of your rotations at school for 3 months, and that's either in the fall, winter, spring, or summer. And the great thing about the way we do it is that you can switch. So for instance, if you're supposed to be at ICO in the fall, it's all randomized when it comes out. And your buddies in the summer, you guys can switch if you guys want to. Within those buckets, you have 3 picks. You have priorities within those picks, and you can switch priorities. For instance, if I had priority to pick a VA first and Tisha had it second, if she really wants this certain VA that's very popular and she knows it, and I don't really care, we can switch. So she can have first priority to get her VA. So there's a better chance for her to get it. There's always deadlines to switch. And so once the deadlines have passed, everything's kind of set in stone on how the order will be when you're picking. And for the most part, I hope that also makes sense. But for the most part, everyone gets usually something that they want. And what I mean, usually it's like the first or second pick for that particular category. So for instance, I did not get my first pick of my VA. I got my second pick of my VA, which I was still very excited, and I heard really good things about, and I ended up having a great time. So it usually always works out for the most part. And I really didn't hear about anyone being like super unhappy with their picks. Now it's a very stressful thing for sure. And my recommendation for anyone, thinking about picking soon or in the future is to kind of figure out the logistics things too, in terms of like the housing and things like that. How are you going to get there? Do you need a car? These are all things that sometimes when you're just so focused on a good site or a good rotation that you heard about, you forget about that. Like, how much money is it going to cost to live there? So, think about the logistics, because that can sometimes add added stress later down the line when it gets closer to actually going there. As far as the secondary part, which is like, what is a good rotation? There, we have a ton of rotation spots, and there's a lot of good ones. I think we have almost 150, if I remember, 160. And it takes a long time to go through them all. You rely a lot on our reviews that past students have used. That's one thing I used a lot. And you talk to the upperclassmen, either the ones that have just graduated, or you reach out to the current students who are going there or have already gone there for a rotation that year and ask them, what did you think? Would you learn? Would you recommend it? Any other questions, living situation, what have you? And so my biggest advice would be, I heard they took away the mandatory VA rotation, and I'd highly recommend doing one. There's some students who always ask me how it was and they didn't do one, and I told them that they kind of missed out. Whether you decide to do residency or work in the VA is a totally different thing, but I think the experience through a VA for 3 months is, you just can't get anywhere else. So that'd be my biggest advice.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard great things about doing the VA rotation, so I would echo that. Definitely do it if you can. And I don't know, Dr. Stennett, if that was similar to sort of how your class did their process, but then sort of any thoughts and recommendations sort of in terms of externship sites that you found like very helpful for your career, very great experiences for you.
I do agree with the VA. I actually saw a lot of ocular disease at that one. That made me very comfortable with that type of practicing. And then I actually chose a lot of the sites based on what I possibly would think about working at in the future. So I actually did do a corporate setting, but it was in a two-door state. So it was in a Vision Works, but the doctor side was kind of like private practice, but it was still in a corporate setting. And then I did do an externship at an OMD OD site. So we were on the OD side, and the ophthalmologist was on the other side. So I got to see how it be to work in that type of setting as well. So I do agree. I definitely still agree with trying to pick a VA site. I'm surprised it's not mandatory anymore, but I would definitely agree with that.
All right. Thank you. Thank
One
you.
one other thing too is that, you have three other picks besides the one you have to do at ICO. That's your time to kind of maybe try out different modes of practice. Because when you're going on these rotations, you're basically an acting doctor. You have an attending that you might have to check in with, but you're pretty much doing the whole thing. So it's almost as if you're working there. So I had one at a corporate position that actually is the same company I work for on Saturdays here, in the general area. It's only like 15 miles away than the one I worked as a student. I worked at a private practice, and then of course I did a VA and then my ICO one. So I think mainly the only other one I could have gone to is maybe like an OD/MD practice. So there's your time to try out these different modes if you're interested in that.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next question, what is your biggest piece of advice for first year, specifically studying for weekly exams? Dr. Wong, if you want to answer that one first.
Um, my I always remember telling the younger students, celebrate your wins, forget your losses, but don't get too high and don't get too low. Just kind of stay in the middle because there's going to be a lot of high times and some low times, hopefully not that many, and just comes with the nature. You're not going to ace every test. You might have a bad test, but you can't let that one bad test kind of bring you down the whole week because you got another test coming up that you can redeem yourself. ICO is very nice in terms of like the way the exams are structured. Your grade is not usually dependent on one or two tests for the quarter. You have three or four to kind of redeem yourself. So I think sometimes people get too low when they see a bad grade, and it happens. And we all have our bad days, and you learn from that. As far as studying go, my first quarter was not the best quarter for me. I really kind of had to figure out a different method than I was using in undergrad, and that is very normal and okay. But you have to be willing to make changes and not stick with what you're doing. If it's not working, you need to figure something else out. For me, it was kind of watching what other people do and learning for how they study and what's working for them might work for you. And so that's kind of what I did. I would steal basically studying habits from my roommates and my friends and how they were studying. And I was like, okay, well, let me see how this goes. And ends up working for me. So then I kind of stick with it, and I just wrote it through the whole program after the first quarter. So I would say don't be afraid to get help when you need it, because sometimes people wait too long. The great thing about ICO is there's a ton of help. I feel like every year there's a new kind of line of help waiting there for the students. Tutoring is a big thing at ICO. It's humongous. It's a great way for the upper years to teach the lower classmen. It's usually the third and fourth years that are doing, and even the second years doing a lot of the tutoring, whether it's for classes or even for skills. I think one of the biggest things would be to find upperclassmen that can mentor you, because they are already ahead of you and they've been through it. I had some good upperclassmen that kind of helped me throughout the program. Some 2 years older, and some 1 year older. And I think I credit a lot of my success to them, and they don't even know it. But so find someone above you and learn from them.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stennett. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree. Just don't try to dwell on the low. Like if you may not do super well on every single exam, or you may do well. That's great for you. But I just want to definitely stress, like, whenever you do not as well as you want to, just keep focusing on what's coming next. Like, and then pick yourself up. Because I remember I did not do well the very first exam that at optometry school. I got the result back, and I was back. I went to the residential complex. I called my mom. I was like, Mom, I'm coming home. I was like, I'm coming home. She's like, Nope, there's nothing here for you. And I was like, You're right. So, and I promised myself that I was not going to let that happen again. I had to change something because there's a reason why I was accepted. There's a reason why I'm here. So I reached into my resources, because there's like a big and little program. I'm not sure if they're still there, ICO. So she was a tutor. She tutored me, I want to say, for most of my subjects, and she helped a lot. Like, definitely don't ever be afraid to ask for help. And I ended up doing very well on the next exam. And that was like, kind of confidence booster. So it helped the rest of the quarter and the rest of the year. Just learning a different way to study. You can get tutoring on almost everything. You get tutoring on the practicals as well. So not only just like the physical exams, you can get help on the practicals. So that also helped as well. So just don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. And try to schedule too. I know it's also hard because every time you turn around, there's another exam coming up. But definitely try to set aside. You have to learn to study multiple things on the same day. You can't just only study for one thing or you'll fall behind. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Great. And thank you both for sharing that. I sort of share that same story when I talk to whether it's interviewees or prospective students if I'm at a recruiting event, is that the first exam may not go well and you feel like, all right, you start to question like, why did I get accepted? Why am I here? And I'm just going to go home. And I tell them the exact same thing, like your parents are like, nope. You probably, it's okay. That can be expected. It's new. It's a transition, just like from 8th grade to high school, from high school to college. It's all a transition. So you may not do well in that first exam, but we have a very robust tutoring program. We have a new program. It's been around for, I think, maybe about 2 years now, maybe 3, sort of different versions though in the past. But we have a Faculty Connects program where students to be assigned to a faculty. We have peer coaching now, and it's not tutoring, but it's really talking about the social cycle side of just being in professional school. It's an adjustment. If you're coming from whether it's Illinois or Canada or California or Maryland, you need to adjust to professional school life and to be able to speak to upperclassmen to learn what they did and get some advice, I think is very helpful. So as both doctors said, ICO is full of resources. So we always encourage folks to reach out to the Student Affairs Department, reach out to faculty, and we can always sort of guide you in terms of where you need to go for specific resources. So thank you for that question. So I have one more question, and it's for you, Dr. Stinnett. Somebody wanted to know, in terms of working as a corporate doctor, what opportunities are there once someone, starts working for the company? Are there opportunities like for promotions or sort of like climbing up within that organization, if you will?
Yeah. So there's always like the store doctor, and then you can be promoted to like a doctor that oversees all the other doctors in your district. And then you can even get promoted even more to handle the clinical side of like the whole organization too. So there's definitely ways to climb up and be promoted to not only just doing exams every day. Like there's other things that you can do as well. That also comes with a lot more money too. So that's also a good incentive.
Yeah, and then more responsibilities as well. And I think sometimes potentially though, that can maybe take you a little bit away from patient care in terms of where you're not doing as much patient care, but more, managing, if you will. And so I always encourage folks, if, you're thinking about maybe working in that corporate environment and potentially moving up the ladder, you can reach out to me. I'm at the admissions at ico.edu email, and I know of a handful of alum, like offhand, but I'm sure I can always connect you with someone who is now maybe more in that managerial role within a corporate environment and maybe seeing patients, not as much, if that's something that somebody's interested in doing. So I thank you guys for these great questions. If you have any more, feel free to drop them in the chat. And we'll be wrapping up here in a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about sort of like work-life balance. Dr. Stinnett, you mentioned you have, kids, you have a husband, and so I know a lot of folks like optometry for that flexibility, but what sort of, would you say in terms of how optometry has been able to allow you to have that work-life balance?
Yeah. So because I chose corporate as the way I want to practice, I don't have to worry about being on call. So that was also important to me. So anytime I'm at home, it's like dedicated to home life. And then also the job that I have, they're very good with PTO and taking time off and even unpaid time off too. So that's always an option, which is always important to me. Yes, I do work every Saturday, but there's also an option where I can choose a couple of Saturdays where I don't want to work a month too. So you just have to find an employer that's willing to work with you. Let them know that what's important to you. Like if it's important for you to leave work on time or for you to be home on the weekends. You just have to divulge that to your future employer, and they'll hopefully work with you. And if not, just choose somebody else to work for. So that's how I.
Thank you. And I'll ask you, Dr. Wong, as well, sort of what, because I know, you're doing your residency, you're also working on Saturdays, but, you have to have some time where you're able to do things and be engaged with family and friends. Or not unless you're just that busy. I don't know.
It's a bad question for me, honestly. I'm a workaholic. I pretty much work 6 or 7 days a week, almost every week. Of course, Monday through Friday is residency. I work every Saturday pretty much. And on Sundays, most Sundays, I will go to one of the local schools, the optometry schools, and I will help the students kind of with their skills that they need me to watch their skills or any tips. And so, yeah, I don't really take any days off. So that's just how I'm rolling this year. And it's not for everyone, but it's for me, and it's only for 1 year. And I've been managing just fine.
Yeah, not a problem. And I think, there's something different for everyone based on where they are in life. You're in your residency, and what I know from residency, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I know for residencies, you're not making as much as if you would, say, go out and work in a corporate environment or a private practice. And so that's why if you talk to any residents, for the folks who are, on the call or watching, you'll find that some of them are working, on Saturdays, at a practice because they are supplementing their income. But at least at ICO, our residencies are a year long. I know there are some 2-year residency programs out there, but like Dr. Wong said, it's just for that year. So, you do this, but then knowing that once your residency is done, you're now probably in a position and to sort of, have a 5-day-a-week job. But I also know Dr. Wong, knowing him, I feel like you still will probably be working on a Saturday somewhere, potentially. But there's nothing
I was a
wrong with that.
workaholic at ICO too.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's sort of finding your groove, if you will. And so I did get one more question that came in. And so the question is, does ICO have classes that teach you about insurances or the business aspect? And so I'll chime in a little bit, but I don't know if either one of you sort of want to answer based on your experiences at ICO.
There is a small business course, a few business courses in the program. I think overall, I don't think any of the programs in the nation offer enough in terms of you're going to be ready to go open your own private practice. You're going to know the ins and outs. I think everyone wants to have that, but I think you have to take a step back and realize that you have to learn so much in optometry school, and there's not a lot of room for other things like the business aspect of running a business day to day. And so, there's a lot of, potential courses that you can take on the side. And I think there's a lot of good resources through ICO, whether it's Dr. Katouf and Dr. Boss. They're both doctors affiliated with ICO who went to ICO, who are very, very knowledgeable in that space. If that's something that you're interested in, I think one of them even has practices around Chicago, one of which I worked at as a student. So, these are ways that you can kind of go above and beyond outside the curriculum to learn what you particularly want to learn about the business aspect.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
And then if I did, I was like, I'm joining corporate afterwards. So I was probably like,
Like, yeah, very different focus. But sort of to Dr. Wong's point, we actually do, we have what's called like the practice management curriculum. And I tell students it's not just classes. Some of the things that Dr. Wong mentioned, Dr. Eric Boss serves as a contact for our students and residents in terms of practice management. He owns a couple of practices in the Chicago area. And so he comes from the lens of assisting our students when it comes to like contract negotiating, helping you understand practice management and what it's like to own your own practice. We do have classes in the third year that talk about the business of optometry, but you also have different events where you're having speakers come in to tell you about different modalities and specialties and learning from them. So it isn't that one thing that's always book knowledge, it's other things that sort of really make up the practice management curriculum at ICO. And so I don't have any other questions in the group, but it sort of will wrap up here and then we'll conclude our webinar about advice. I know someone asked a little bit about advice for students who are entering the program. But what about any advice for students who may be on the call and they are interested, let's say in optometry, but they're a few years out, sort of what would you advise them, especially like if they're still like a freshman or sophomore in undergrad, what type of advice would you give them in terms of preparing for optometry school?
So I would advise you to shadow an optometrist. You can do it in different settings too, private practice, corporate. There's a lot of doctors willing to take somebody on to watch them just to get a feel for the career and everything. And then as far as like academic wise, it's always good to have an upward trend. That's what I would say. So even if you're in your freshman year or even sophomore year of college and you feel like you didn't do so well, really grind hard the last 2 years, couple of years, and an upward trend always looks good. At least that's what I was told at my interview. And then we would definitely study for the OAT. That helps as well. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo the same things. I mean, if not shadowing, then I mean, working in a practice, just get immersed into the field and make sure you know what the field is about. That will help you in your interview process. Talk about, why you want to do optometry and they're always looking for you to understand the field. And if you've never worked in it or shadowed, it's going to be really hard for you to talk about the field of optometry. It's expanding, and our scope of practices in different states are expanding. So it can be quite exciting in the future, especially as we move to be more of a medical, more medical in optometry. As far as academics goes, I would say, don't sell yourself short, just because you might feel like you don't have the best GPA. Don't let that stop you from applying to the school that you want to go to, because you just never know. ICO in particular doesn't just look at your scores, and good GPAs and OAT scores do not usually always translate to being the best doctor. So they look at you as a whole, and that upward trend is good. And so make sure you get your letters of recommendations from people who know you as well, because you'll need those to apply, and definitely go in with an open mind, because I think what one school you might not think that school is right for you, but until you go there. So always entertain the interviews, because you just never know. I did not know what I was going to expect going to Chicago. I had never gone to Chicago. It was my first time, and I went. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you both for your advice and your helpful tips for our prospective students. And I would echo that as well. I think shadowing is going to be the best thing for you. And you have the option of course, shadowing an ICO alum. I think I mentioned this earlier. So if you email the admissions office at admissions@ico.edu, we'll be happy to put you in connection with an ICO alum in your area. And so, thank you all for joining us. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.